Good morning and good afternoon to those joining us for our webinar today on data analytics. We're excited to host you alongside our partners RSM, and we thank you for taking the time to tune in. Before we kick things off, I'll be going over the agenda and a few housekeeping rules. The day is going to start with a fireside chat with Jim Kumplowski and Steve Biskey, who are part of our long-standing director at RSM, and both are national leaders of data and risk analytics who are leading different initiatives across organizations. RSM has also been one of the most engaged and active partners at Plug and Play, so it's always a pleasure to work alongside them, and we thank them for attending. After the fireside chat, we will hear presentations from 4 incredible startups in our ecosystem.
Hey guys, so this is Maxim here. I think maybe we're having some difficulties with Charlie's internet connection, but I'll be moderating the fireside chat with Jim and Steve, and we'll have 4 startup presentations as well: M-Particle, Data Risk, Tangu, and Infer. We'll follow that with some wrap-up, final Q&A, contact information for folks in Plug and Play and the startups, and yeah. I think we can go ahead and kick it off. First off, though, I want to go over a few webinar housekeeping rules. Please, remain muted unless you're presenting. That's for the presenters and the startups. For the audience, submit questions using the Q&A at the bottom of your window. You can, submit a question at any point during the presentation, and we'll get to them at the end. Use the chat feature for general questions or comments or any issues you're experiencing. And after each presentation from the startups, we'll have a poll that you can complete to see kind of what you think of the startup, if you want an introduction to the company, and that will kind of allow us to then make those introductions. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce, first off, Jim Klimkowski. He's Principal and National Leader of Data Analytics and Great Lakes, Consulting Leader at RSM. And we also have Steve Biskey, Director, National Leader of Risk Analytics and Automation at RSM as well. Both professionals who have worked in a variety of different fields within data analytics and are going to be the experts on our panel today as we talk about the evolution in the space. Welcome, Jim and Steve.
Thanks, Maxim. Glad to be here.
Yep, glad to have you. How about, just to start out, we know RSM does a lot of different things from audit, tax, and consulting, but perhaps you can just explain a bit from your side about what RSM is.
Sure, absolutely. Kind of the simplest way to describe it, so most people will understand. We're the 5th biggest audit tax consulting firm in the world. We're a little different, though, than the others. We're very, very focused on being the first choice advisor to the middle market globally. So although we do a lot of upmarket work for larger companies, most of our focus are smaller businesses. So think of that $100 million to $1 billion or $1.5 billion of revenue. Our data analytics group is actually, our center of excellence for data analytics is actually spread over all 3 lines of our business. We do traditional business intelligence. We do advanced analytics, not just for general decision makers, but our risk group that Steve leads, we do a lot around fraud, forensic accounting, also just kind of risk mitigation for oftentimes the internal audit leader as well as chief counsel.
Right, so a lot of different areas that you're touching on with data analytics there as well. And maybe you could also share a little bit more about sort of your backgrounds and your own roles at RSM.
Sure, I'll start on that and then hand over to Jim. So my background, kind of a non-traditional way of getting into analytics. My grandfather was an IRS agent. My father was an accountant. So I kind of wanted to go into accounting. And then taking courses at Michigan State, one of my first computer science courses, I realized I just love this concept of programming and got into programming. And then backed into, I hit the accounting profession at a time when the profession was starting to look at this realm of how do we audit IT systems and computers and things like that. So timing of my education just hit well. but throughout my career in both internal audit, external audit, and as a compliance professional, there's always been this theme of using data, either to better understand how a process works or to find issues. I come from a different background than Jim in that you'll hear me use the word audit a lot, which sometimes has a negative connotation, but at the end of the day, someone who's doing an audit is trying to find things that might be hidden in processes or data. So by using analytics, we can actually mine through 100% of transactions to find those anomalies and those behaviors that might be masked by other things going on in the organization. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about analytics in the risk and compliance space. Jim's got a more traditional background though. Jim, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Steve, first off, I did not know your father was an IRS agent. That explains a lot. I have had more of a traditional introduction to data analytics. So I just really started my IT career as a programmer, ultimately started to get involved in some data warehouses as early, I don't want to date myself, but as early as the mid-90s. So I've been really involved in consulting for 30 years and data analytics-oriented consulting specifically for the last 25. At RSM, our national leader for our data analytics practice. And I also have a second hat where I lead consulting. We have 5 different consulting groups for our Great Lakes region as well.
Got it. Sounds good. And Steve, I wanted to mention too, so my sister's actually an auditor, so I understand kind of that attention to detail and how important that is.
Awesome.
When it comes to, making sure all of your systems are working properly. But definitely, want to kick this off thinking about how RSM uses data analytics internally. You both have had a lot of different exposure to it, but sort of what are some of the main use cases you've seen for data analytics within RSM?
So, Maxim, at the highest level, there's 2, I think, big categories, right? We have used data analytics to become more efficient at providing existing solutions that we provide today. We have also used data analytics to come up with some brand new solutions that we've never offered before for our customers. And then pure internally, right? Our use cases for data analytics really are not unlike any other professional services business. So, whether we're trying to figure out who's most likely to not pay an invoice and the later, we, from an efficiency standpoint, all 3 lines of business have baked data analytics techniques into their core methodologies or approaches for delivering services. You could imagine an international tax client who has multiple locations, multiple ERP systems. You got to get all that data out, cleaned up, make sure it's accurate, and get it into another tool to do your tax analytical work on it. And last but not least, we've developed some use cases where we've offered brand new services that we've never offered in the past. So, for instance, Steve's group has done a lot around proactive anti-fraud kind of identification, right, for our clients. We're doing a lot of work as a managed service now for clients, cleaning up their data, for instance, their CRM data, and keeping it clean over time, as well as enriching that data with more useful information that they can use to drive their business.
Right. Within the fintech vertical, anti-money laundering and AML is a big topic as well. And sort of the data analytics of being able to track these transactions ties into it deeply. Maybe could you go into a little bit more detail in terms of how RSM has used that for its risk and compliance?
Sure. I'll give you a couple of fintech examples specifically, and we'll start with AML. So for those of you not familiar, AML is anti-money laundering. And just like you watch on TV shows with the mobsters, they're trying to figure out how do they clean their money in here. And there are various regulations around what financial services organizations, or really anyone who's dealing with cash and cash equivalents, need to do with this. So there's some robust software packages that have been on the market for a while related to AML. However, from a compliance perspective, the bank still needs to prove that those technologies are working accurately. So a lot of what we'll do is we'll use analytics to actually try to complement those technologies, create rules that are very similar to those, and see what are we flagging that may not be flagged in those solutions, and then do some statistical analysis to figure out, why is that not being flagged? Is this the result of maybe a rule not being tuned correctly? So there are various parameters that the organization can can input when they're using these technologies. But effectively, we're doing what's known in compliance as a model validation. We're effectively creating a very similar model using analytics to say, does our model come up with similar results? And if not, is it explainable why that happens? Another fintech example I think is pretty interesting when we get into fair lending. So in the US, we've got a lot of regulations around for financial institutions, making sure that if they're making lending decisions, they can't discriminate and approve loans to non-minority parties at different ratios than they would to minority parties, various ratios around that. And we'll use not only bank data for that, but sometimes in the regulatory space, there's also public data that a bank needs to contribute. So we'll map into peer data as well as census data as well. So we're pulling census tract data and really looking forward to the new census coming out so we get some refresh data in here. But we can effectively geospatially map how that bank's decision not only relates to their peers, but the census region and the groups as a whole, and allow them to do some what-if type analysis to see how can different changes in their processes change the way they compare against peers and the census tract itself.
That's interesting. Yeah, I definitely was pretty familiar with that first anti-money laundering use case, but that second example of actually how you can use data analytics to build more sort of financial inclusion and equity, that's pretty interesting as well.
Yep. And one additional point on that, Maxim, that I think is interesting as well. Sometimes we talk about predictive analytics in terms of predicting something magical, what customers do we need to do business with, or those types of things. But we also use predictive analytics to infer data that may not be in the data set itself. So going back to the fair lending side, if I'm doing a mortgage, I know what sex you are. That's actually part of the mortgage application. But if I'm issuing a loan for a car loan, that's not actually part of the application. But we'll use predictive algorithms combined with, again, both census data as well as data from ancestral sites and common names as of a person's age based on a zip code to actually predict the gender of someone to feed back into those algorithms as well.
Got it. Yeah, so it gets pretty comprehensive there. Is there any kind of specific learnings or great experiences kind of you've seen from doing that type of analytics?
Well, I think the big learning that Jim can attest to is, sometimes the quality of your analytic is based on how good your data is as well. And, no matter how large the organization, inevitably organizations tend to have a lot of poor quality data. So we're doing a lot of initiatives through Jim's team on helping organizations implement better data governance processes and get more control over really that source of the truth.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And no, I appreciate that. And I wanted to learn a little bit more, about how RSM uses data analytics with regards to your clients as well. I know that you work with a variety of different types of funds and maybe do modeling and analytics for those. Can you kind of go a little bit more into how that works out in your analytics?
Sure, Maxim. I don't know if you mean so much our internal client processes around how we actually work with our clients or external things we do for them. But from the fund or transaction standpoint, we do quite a bit of what we call deal analytics. So on the sell side or the buy side, if someone is selling a company or buying a company, we'll download the data of that target and really mine the data and try to identify unique things that we would not have gotten, right, from looking at audited financial statements. So we may find that this company you're about ready to buy, 90% of their revenue is coming from two customers. One of the customers is about ready to go out of business and the other one is the owner's uncle, right? You might want to discount what you're paying for that company as a result. If you're talking more internally, we're using data analytics internally across the entire client value cycle. Client intake, for instance, is a very important kind of process for us. We need to make sure that we're doing business with clients who are creditworthy, right? But we also have to make sure that we're not violating the independence rules associated with our accounting industry. We use data analytics oftentimes during project execution to try to flag projects that might be getting off track, right? And so that we can fix them before hopefully our clients experience any disruption. And then last but not least, I kind of mentioned a little bit, we're also using it around billing and collection. So making sure, we're billing clients properly for the right amounts, at the right time, and that we're collecting our fees as we should.
Got it. I think that's very critical. That's the portion of analytics that touches on essentially how smoothly your business is running. And, if you're taking on projects or new clients, is there ultimately going to be value for your company? And I think that's a space that a lot of different corporations are looking into right now. What type of returns have you seen internally when you kind of measure the impact of using these type of analytics?
I think every use case is different, but in some cases, we're seeing order of magnitude returns. And actually, one of our challenges as a professional services firm, Maxim, is how do we capture that value? And what I mean by that is, let's say we manually did a task that took us 200 hours, and we billed our client for that work, and now we've automated that task. Well, do we just charge our client 200 hours less for our fees? Or do we, somehow split that savings with them, and how do we bill for that? It's kind of an interesting challenge. Long term, right? Everyone is going to start to use data analytics as how they provide these solutions. So we're just going to have to do it to stay in the game and be competitive from a price perspective. But we've had anywhere from under 1x returns to 10x returns depending on the use case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like there may be some sort of new methodologies needed for how to calculate rather than just the number of hours people worked, maybe the technology that's being used. And, touching on sort of the team outside of kind of what you mentioned about those who, your new technologies that are more automated, there are a lot of different people who are involved in building this out internally, from data analysts to data scientists and data engineers. What does your sort of internal structure look like for analytics, and how do you kind of build out that team?
Yeah. So Jim already alluded to, we've got a lot of different teams that deal with data analytics within RSM. I think one of the things we've strived to do as an organization is, despite our size, actually set up some structures so we can be highly collaborative in the way we work. So Jim and I are part of a cross-functional team that includes people from various lines of business involved in analytics. We have regular calls talking about what's going on. And we're also looking forward to say, hey, is there something we all seem to be doing that might make more sense in a center of excellence as opposed to being piecemealed out throughout that? But I think, the other thing on the consulting side for sure is a lot of the skills that are required depend on the nature of the project. Sometimes we'll have a client that knows exactly what they want. I want this type of analysis done on this type of data, and I effectively want to direct people who just have the technical skills to be able to make that happen. But on the other end of the spectrum, we've got clients that either don't know what they want at all, or think they know what they want, but don't really know what's needed to make that happen. So I think a lot of what we need to do is look at the specific scenario. We do tend to have cross-functional teams in a lot of efforts. So I'll take the risk analytics that we do. We found early on that if we just took someone who knew technology, who knew how to write analytics, their challenge was, without the domain expertise, if they're doing a fraud analysis, for example, a common vendor fraud analysis, they might write an analytic that's producing results, but without that domain expertise, they couldn't necessarily look at the results and say, well, wait a minute, that looks a little bit weird, or I think this might be a false positive because of these types of things. So by blending those skills, either by finding those unicorns that happen to know both analytics and functional processes within that, or just having teams that combine those types of knowledge, I think that's helpful in there. Last thing I mentioned, data scientists, we certainly have data scientists on the team. I remember one of our good data scientists, we had him do some visualizations in a data viz tool and found out that, maybe his data science background doesn't work well for visualization. So a lot of it's just understanding what skills are needed and how do we bring a collaborative team together to be able to produce those skills. Jim, I see that resonated with you as well.
Yeah, that's a funny example because you're absolutely right, Steve. We found that, for instance, our data scientists, they want to do data science-oriented work, right? They don't want to do visualizations. They don't want to be doing ETL work, right? They really want to be doing advanced analytics with the tools they've been trained on. So, we still have work to do, but we are trying to get those folks solely focused on those types of opportunities. Part of the challenge, though, is the mid-market, right? I guess it was back in 2018, we had Nielsen do a big study of our mid-market CXO clients in terms of what they saw as being the biggest risks and opportunities. And they finally said, harvesting the power of our data as one of the biggest opportunities. I always jokingly tell people data analytics in the mid-market, it's sort of like fashion. It starts on the West Coast, goes to New York, then Chicago, and ends up in Dubuque, Iowa. And that's kind of what we've seen. And I think you're going to ask, I don't want to steal your thunder. I think you have some questions later on, but data analytics has definitely finally hit the mid-market strong and picked up very, very solidly. We've had tremendous growth across all of our practices.
Right. No, that's actually a great segue into kind of what I wanted to talk about next, which wasn't just sort of RSM's use of analytics, but kind of what you're seeing more broadly within the market for data analytics. You have both been in the space for a long time. How have you seen kind of enterprises change their adoption of different business analytics tools?
Yeah, I think it's been radically different, Steve, and I'll certainly jump over to you to share your insights over the past 2 years. Now, don't get me wrong, our upmarket clients have been using a lot of these techniques for a long period of time, but our core middle market clients, I mean, to be honest, they couldn't afford oftentimes, right, to do a lot with their data. And now, right, with, kind of the democratization of data analytics, both in visualization tools as well as data wrangling and all those aspects, they have a much better opportunity, right, to really kind of look at that and explore and hopefully, if they're nimble, use that data to, jump or leapfrog some of their more traditional competitors. So I definitely feel like in the mid-market, it is definitely penetrating in a very big way over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's good to see, because I think you're going to be seeing a lot more efficient business processes, and perhaps those companies that aren't as quick to adopt it might kind of not really know where they stand in terms of their own processes, because they don't have the analytics to really be able to gauge these and may fall behind a bit. What are your thoughts on sort of, how artificial intelligence ties in with analytics and perhaps these no-code or low-code environments that are now being used to sort of develop more analytics for maybe the middle market?
Yeah, it's kind of what I referred to, Maxim, this, democratization of data analytics. I mean, it used to be, 7 or 8 years ago, Steve, if you wanted a report, right, you would call the service desk and create a ticket, and you would wait 3 or 4 weeks, right, for IT to come back with your report. Generally, it'd be wrong, right? So you'd have multiple iterations to finally get it right. And then you'd have your report, right? Our tools now, the visualization tools, we're very, very focused on Power BI. We do a fair amount of Tableau and also some ClickView. Those tools, if you're a business savvy user and have an interest in doing a few things that are maybe a little more technical than Excel, right? You can create those reports on your own. And now we're seeing with other tools like Alteryx, even a democratization of the next layer of data analytics solution. So we used to have people spending tons of time, downloading data from different systems and comma delimited files in Excel, right, and trying to clean it up. Some of the tools, though, now allow our users to even do a lot of that cleanup.
Mm-hmm. I see. Do you see any potential challenges, though, perhaps with folks who don't have that same sort of like engineering understanding of really being able to visualize processes and understand how they work, maybe if they don't have a technical background using some of these tools?
Absolutely. That's why my phone rings at 3 o'clock in the morning. What happens is, and actually it's kind of funny, Steve, we kind of work this out between us, even at RSM, right? I don't view data analytics as something that our data analytics team exclusively does. It is a tool. Like when the PC came out, we didn't say, okay, anybody who wants to use a PC, our infrastructure practice has to be involved with that, right? So we have folks doing data analytics or using data analytics techniques all over the firm. But what we do try to do, if we're going to build something that becomes a permanent part of our client's technology footprint, we get the architects involved to make sure that it's scalable, right? That it's not going to shut down. Otherwise we tend to, quite frankly, get those calls at our call center late at night because something's broken.
Yeah, and I think, Jim, you hit on, there's a sustainability factor that goes beyond just the, what happens if things go down. I mentioned, Maxim, that I had some computer science background as well, which I really enjoyed. And there's this thinking, you learn how to create repeatable code, right? And if you're handing off these tools to someone who maybe in a functional area and they have all the best intent, but they've not really thought through how do I reuse this in the future as thresholds change, as the nature of the business I want to look at change. How do I redo this without having to rewrite code? Sometimes what you'll see is what they put together was a great point solution, but not something that's very scalable as well.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
One last thing, Maxim, on that. I think it's really important for business users who tackle this themselves, right? To make sure that they're really putting controls in place to ensure that what their output is, that it's actually accurate based on the input data. Sometimes these tools automate so much, right? If you're not careful, you might not realize what you're recommending and really understanding, is it truly accurate based on the data that you were given? Got it.
And there's, a couple of other questions that I had that sort of relate to some of the startup presentations we actually have later. But, have you seen any issues with data privacy access as perceptions around data evolve with things like GDPR, CCPA, maybe your data that you're taking from other companies or customers?
Yeah.
Kind of, how do you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, on the compliance side, it's definitely become a big issue. I come from an internal audit background where internal auditors by charter have rights to view all company data. But even with that, we're seeing on the internal audit profession recognition that some of the data we have access to is highly, highly sensitive. And I think, 20 years ago, we used to be able to say, hey, just give me your employee master file. I'm going to bump it up against vendors. But these days we have to think about encryption, not only of the data in transit, but also at rest in here. We're looking at, when we get into various regulations in different countries, not just GDPR, but sometimes we have to be sensitive to where that data is being processed and look at, can we spin up an Azure server in that country so that data is actually not having to move. We are seeing with some of the technologies, we're working with some big banks right now, the advantage of some of these tools to actually do the processing on that system itself within the organization without having to transfer the data outside of the organization to do some of the crunching. So some of the capabilities of those tools have made us be able to do processing on the organization systems themselves with our own tools, which has been nice. But I think the whole area of privacy has really made data analysis a lot more complex, particularly when dealing with international organizations.
Got it. And, sort of one final question I had, touching on the startups that we have as well. So, our platform at Plug and Play can help connect startups with corporations like RSM. But, from your experience in general, like how should startups approach working with an organization like RSM? Maybe first getting in touch with you, and then kind of what's the process if maybe they have new technology in this space that could be useful for RSM?
Well, obviously they can get in touch with us through you guys, right? We're a big sponsor of everything that you do. We've gotten tremendous value from that, and always will have a willing audience to look at what these startups do. But also, I think it's just really, it's actually, I'll be honest, it's a little hard, right? We have, I don't know, what is it, Steve, 900 partners, and in some ways it's like 900 CEOs. So you kind of got to get started in the right place. But certainly if anybody has any questions specifically around data analytics solutions, they could start with Steve or I, and we can get them to the right group within the company. Our offerings, right, are all about creating value for clients. So any tool, right, that we find can help us do that and, bring value to our clients, we're certainly going to be interested in.
Got it. Appreciate that. And, just had one kind of question that came in from the audience. What advice would you have for, large enterprise that's seeking a more data-driven approach? I think
that's a great question.
How they could sort of start to implement and kind of start on that journey.
Yeah. No, I think one of the best places to start, I mean, it's like anything else. You got to think, am I going to go top up or bottom up or top down? We see a lot of our clients enter into the space by really trying to identify what are the key performance indicators of their business and creating, an executive level or a leader level dashboard that allows folks to know in near real time how different aspects of the business are doing. So, not just financial measures, right? Obviously everybody has financial measures and knows what their revenue is for the month versus last year, all those sorts of things, but even operational measures. So, what kind of defects am I getting on my assembly line? how quickly am I turning inventory over, et cetera. That's a great place to start with those KPIs because it could have the biggest impact on the business. The other thing we've seen is just folks actually creating data analytics centers of excellence. In fact, within RSM, we've created several innovation groups, and we have a lot of contests and games for them. So we've had bot wars, we've had advanced analytic contests where teams kind of just organize and build a solution that they think will help RSM or our customers, and then compete for different prizes or awards based on how effective the committee feels that they are.
Got it.
Steve, do you have anything to add to that one?
Gamifying it a little bit, yeah. And
we have, and
just want to mention we do have a couple of startup presentations that I want to get to, but let me know kind of what are your kind of last thoughts, anything you kind of want to leave the audience with here?
Steve, do you want to go first, or?
Yeah, I just echo something you said. I think for organizations getting started, the biggest thing is to find that momentum, and what that really entails. Pick a topic that's going to get someone in senior management excited, because once you get someone in senior leadership excited about something, all the funding and all the other issues kind of go away in there. But tied into that, that also means pick something that's going to get someone excited that you're not climbing Mount Everest to get to. Take something that you think you can do in a reasonable amount of time with the resources you've got, tackle that right away, and kind of move at it that way. What's going to get leadership interested in what you've been doing? Jim, your thoughts?
No, I think that's great. I think I would describe that as pick a realistic problem statement, right? Pick something that is a significant pain to your company or your business, but also something that you can solve fairly quickly. I think momentum is critical, like any other kind of IT or transformation initiative. Showing early success and getting some momentum really makes things easier.
Got it. Yeah, maybe starting small, perhaps kind of getting a first win and then building that momentum from there to be able to take on those bigger projects. Appreciate that. Well, great having you. Thanks, Steve and Jim. I really appreciate your insight. It's always good to hear from our partners, especially one as active as RSM. So thanks. I think, we've gotten a lot from the corporate side, and then stick around. We're going to launch into some startup presentations on how they're innovating now in the data analytics space. Thanks again, Steve and Jim.
Thanks, Max.
So just really quick for our startup presentations, again, we'll be having mParticle, Data Risk, Tangu, and Infer. Each startup has 8 minutes to pitch, followed by 2 minutes Q&A. People in the audience, if you have a question, please don't be shy. Go ahead and ask it, and we'll share it with the startups at the end of their presentations. The moderator I'll turn on my camera at the end of each pitch to kind of signal the start of the Q&A and introduce the next startup. So without further ado, we have mParticle.
Customers interact with your brand in more ways than ever, on mobile, web, in-store, and online. And every interaction produces more and more data. But as a product manager, developer, or marketer, how can you make sense of all this data and act on it to deliver the best customer experience? mParticle. It's a customer data platform that collects granular real-time customer data from every source and sends it to any channel or tool across your stack. From data warehouses, to analytics, to marketing tools. As customers engage, mParticle collects, cleanses, and unifies user events and attributes into individual persistent profiles, giving you a 360-degree view of customers. You can also build self-maintaining audience segments to track users and forward customer data across your entire stack with one click. mParticle is built for your whole team, including non-technical members, to easily manage transactions and attributes on the most precise level, whether for policy, maintenance, or anything else. With mParticle, your data flows round-trip. You don't need to build and maintain tool integrations, and you can send whatever customer data wherever you need it. mParticle can help you provide your customers with personalized, real-time omni-channel experiences. It's what allows Chick-fil-A's app to use geolocation and push notifications to time orders, and provides Via with the data necessary to minimize rider wait times. And these examples are just the tip of the iceberg. Learn how Imparticle can help you maximize the value of your data and exceed customer expectations. Request a demo today.
Awesome. My name is John Joe. I work in Imparticle. I lead our solutions partnerships as well as the relationship with Plug and Play. And so that intro video gives you kind of a sense of what we as a CDP try to operate. But right now, just to make sure everyone can see my screen, you should be seeing a mess hellscape of a data architecture that I'm sure most brands, especially in the enterprise, are more familiar with than most. And this is kind of the problem statement that we're trying to solve against, where we call it legacy data architecture. It's probably the current data architecture for many companies, where over time, this kind of Frankenstein approach to data management has been created, where individual connections are being created and managed between data sources and the activation endpoints. The problem that creates, as we just heard from the panel, is that when you're doing this by piecemeal, there's no consistency, nor is there access in terms of how that data is managed. So you probably have different counts around users, events, and then abstracted metrics such as monthly active users and average order values and everything downstream of that when you're looking at each one of these tools. So there's no consistency in trends or how data is managed. I think the soundbite that's being used more and more today is if you have garbage data in, you're getting garbage data out. And so your data infrastructure is really not informing any of the endpoints that are trying to leverage this data. And so you guys aren't, companies aren't driving towards the business goals that they need to. And that's really what Imparticle aims to solve, is resetting as kind of that central source of truth for all customer data. And we do that in three primary ways. We automate the collection of all customer data from whatever data source it is, whether it's your mobile apps, your website, your backend systems, your point of sale systems, your data lakes, any third-party services that you're relying on. And then all of that data is standardized, so it's mapped to a single data model and event taxonomy, so that whether it's purchase dash complete or purchase underscore complete or purchased is all mapping to a single event. And then we're tying all of that data to views of the customer as individuals, not customers as screens or customers as devices, but we're deterministically tying common threads together so that you have a single view of what your customers are doing across all of the touch points that you have as a brand. And why that's so important is a few things. I think we heard a lot in the panel about the democratization of data. Within our UI, long gone are the days of logging tickets with IT, not just to get reports created, but to actually activate the data sources or the endpoints that you might want to need. So think back to when any company listening may have tried to stand up their Google Analytics instance for the first time. That probably required a ticket logged, a lengthy review process, and then if it got approved, your mobile and web developer is actually installing the SDKs and the necessary source code so that you could start collecting and sending all required events to Google Analytics. Involved within that is the event mapping process, app re-releases, QA, and this lengthy process just to get one tool activated. With Imparticle, because we act as that central source of truth, and we're also the service which both collects and disseminates all events and user profiles, you can actually build your analytics stack directly from Imparticle's UI. So within the instance of Google Analytics, I'm literally just selecting it from my integration marketplace. I'm adding it by providing some authentication key, at which point that is then a service where I can manage how data flows to that service from specific sources. So say I want all of my iOS data to then flow directly to Google Analytics. I can do that with a point and click UI in a matter of minutes, as opposed to over the course of several weeks or months. I can do this as a marketer. I can do this as a business stakeholder, a data engineer, whatever it is. So we really are democratizing data, not at the point of data analysis, but upstream of that at the point of data collection and activation. What's even more important than actually being able to activate that data is ensuring that there's good quality of data. So I know that we heard the panelists talk about making sure that there's consistency in how data is managed, and that's another tool or purpose that Imparticle really solves nimbly. And so again, as a non-technical stakeholder, I can come in and say, how is my data flowing from iOS to my Amazon S3 bucket? And I can set up specific rules about what attributes, whether they are event or user attributes, I'm either forwarding or not forwarding, any sort of attribution data about select publishers or any engagement endpoints that I'm using, or even specific compliance states, whether it relates to GDPR or CCPA and different rules surrounding those regulations, whether it's consent or remarketing or data harvesting. I can also choose to throttle my data. So for the purposes of cost control, if there's services such as a Google Analytics or a campaign analytics platform that's charging me on total volume of data or record count, but that only needs a representative sample size of my data, something like 7 or 8%, I can easily throttle down that data, again, just with a point and click UI, and really easily control costs. And what's more is I can apply blanket rules to any of my connections or just to my data infrastructure as a whole. So we have pre-built rule sets around GDPR and CCPA so that we're making sure, for instance, within the confines of GDPR, we're not merging anonymous advertiser-based IDs and any known PII, as would be in violation of those rules. Because again, we are the central source of truth and the processor for all of a brand's data, we can make sure that as anonymous ad IDs come in, that they get blocked from any destination where PII is actually stored. And then beyond those preset rules, we provide really nimble control about which events, users, or attributes of any of those objects are actually forwarded on to specific services. So outside the confines of predetermined rule sets, if you do or do not want to send data to any different services for any reason, you can do so again within a point and click UI and radio buttons, as opposed to having to read the letter of the law of all these regulations as they become increasingly more stringent and complicated, and going in and editing them at the code level and then re-releasing your app or all of the dependent services so that those changes actually apply. You could have a compliance manager whose whole job is just to make sure that data is being restricted as well as flowing to all of the endpoints where it should or should not be going. So again, I think the panel did a great job about articulating this, but it's the democratization of data as well as the assurance that you're getting quality data that's the same everywhere is really the way that organizations are transforming themselves through data-driven strategies. Because if you are a data-driven organization, but you are relying on infrastructure such as this, you're probably too hindered, and to be honest, you probably don't have the quality of data that you need to make informed and good decisions in terms of what the proper growth strategies are. And there's a lot more that mParticle can do depending on who the stakeholder is, whether you're a data engineer determining what the master data model or some subsequent data plans should be, whether you're a marketer who's trying to build real-time cohorts or audiences and syndicate them to the correct endpoints.
Yep. And we have time for just one question, and appreciate your presentation there. So mParticle collects a lot of data points such as locations and other events. What are some events relative for banks and financial institutions that mParticle can help with?
It's a great question. So we work with a lot of financial services, both corporate banks, retail banks, as well as some of the digital innovators like Venmo. And you think of a company like a retail bank, they may have new account opened, or on their website they may have browsed a site about mortgage rates. I know that then that user is someone that I want to put in a specific marketing campaign or channels around some of my mortgage products. Similarly, if I identify through some machine learning algorithm that's plugged into my user data that they have a high propensity of possibly churning or going elsewhere with their mortgage banking, then I may want to provide them a discounted offer or feed that information to my backend systems so I can be more informed about what messaging I need to push to my existing users to make sure that I retain or expand their business.
Got it. And one really quick question from our audience. How does mParticle work with already established customer 360s?
Not sure I fully understand the question, but we're meant to just be a processing layer. So if you're already creating that singular view of the customer that exists on a backend service like a data lake, we have an open API, our mParticle endpoint, where you can feed all of that data in and it gets incorporated into your master data model. And maybe that 360 view is the basis of the data model that you're going to use here. But I ensure two things. One, it's not incorporating every single consumer touch point, nor is it ingesting, resolving, and then activating that data in real time. So for stuff like retail banks and location-based services, it's very important to know where a user is within real time and then be able to push them a message if, say, you're trying to get them to come in and use your ATMs. It's the real-time nature of mParticle's collection, resolution, and then activation of that data, which makes it an enterprise-grade CDP.
Got it. Thank you. And for the audience, you should have received a poll. If you'd like an introduction to mParticle, please click that as well. Next up, we have data risk.
Hello guys, thank you Plug and Play for the opportunity. My name is Luis Henrique Lourenço and I'm a business analyst here at Data Risk. So we have a really simple agenda here. I'll make an overview of the company, then I will talk about our products and some consulting cases that we built over the years. So Data Risk is an AI product-focused Brazilian startup. Over our 3 years of existence, we developed some proprietary products with our own technology, and we developed other products out of consulting cases. It's worth mentioning that Data Risk was founded with the purpose to democratize data science. So our main product, which is DataPred, is a SaaS auto machine learning platform that basically from a raw database, you can get a machine learning model. We also have Data Check, which is a OCR platform that can identify fraud analysis during the client's onboarding process. And we also have our AI consulting team that basically solve problems through AI. Talking a little bit more about DataPred. So this is what the traditional modeling cycle looks like in big organizations such as big banks and large organizations. So our founders, they basically work with machine learning since it's not called that way. So they have a really interesting background working with machine learning and artificial intelligence, and they saw an opportunity to make it accessible to a bigger audience once you can automate the whole cycle. So this is what the modeling cycle looks like on our platform. Basically, from a raw database, we can produce a machine learning model, and once the model is built, you can consume this model by one of our APIs. So the main idea of this product is something that was mentioned a lot during the panel. It's about democratizing data science, it's about reaching a bigger audience. So just one thing that I would like to put that I think is worth mentioning, that a big part of the success of this product is the part of the support. So once you're aiming for a non-technical audience, you have to give them the tools to really understand your product and to really make sure they use this on their organizations in order to produce value. So this is one case of usage of our product. It's a company here in Brazil that works with student credit. They had a really short-staffed team and a team of people that are just starting their career. So within 8 months, they were able to produce 26 models, and they were able to expand machine learning usage through other verticals like churn, collection, other than just credit. So our product helped them expand machine learning usage throughout the organization. This other case is a product distributor. This one, we also did a consulting project. So their challenge was to diminish default in their operations. So we did a little consulting project for them. We developed a credit and churn model. We've designed credit policies and churn policies based on the model. And we also did a chatbot, so their sales representatives could consult these policies in real time when they are at the point of sale to actually sell those products. So our solution reduced default in over 30%. And I think what is the biggest achievement here is that we built a solution that was really easy for the people that most need it, which was the sales representatives. So this is Data Check. This is our SaaS OCR platform. It is focused to identify fraud through face match, signature match, and we also, through the OCR technology, we can consult the document information of the client to see if it's actually the same person. And now I would like to disclose some consulting cases. This is a steel manufacturer here in Brazil. They wanted to automatize its credit process. The old process used to take 4 hours to manually input the balance sheet information, do all the calculations, and also choose the credit policy they wanted to apply. So we built for them a customized solution that we use an OCR technology to extract the balance sheet information. The platform could consult the company's information on Brazilian credit bureaus. The credit analyst, once they had all the information, could handpick a credit policy to apply. And all the process that usually took 4 hours is now made in 30 seconds. Also, our last case is a collection bureau here in Brazil. They wanted to optimize its efforts, so they hired us to develop a collection model. We built them a collection model using data from the historical data from calls and payments. We did a model, we compare our performance with the organization's performance, and we boost their performance in 64% in just 3 days. So this is it about data risk. I hope you guys could see some of the trends that we see in data analytics. We talk about collection models. On the panel, we heard about fraud models. Credit models are already something that organizations see great value in. So I hope this expands the whole idea of data analytics. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. So we have a question from the panel here, or from the audience rather. So the panel mentioned that non-technical users may be able to build point solutions, but have difficulty building scalable solutions to reuse. How do you address this issue?
I'm not sure if I understood the question, but our infrastructure is something that really aims to resolve problems as scaling machine learning models. So once the model is built, it's already available an API to score it. So if I'm correct in my understanding of the question, our concern with the infrastructure is already something that really can help achieve greater usage of machine learning within organizations.
Got it. And then second question, which markets are you operating in?
We're operating in Brazilian market. We are more focused on credit because we think the credit market is already more mature and they see more value on our solutions. They already have a lot of contact with machine learning as a standard tool in the market. But we position ourselves as a company that can solve any problems because data is something really generalistic. So we position ourselves this way.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate it, Luis. And that's data risk. Click in the poll if you'd like an introduction. Next up, we will be having Tangu, which helps to make data most useful. Tangu helps companies become data-driven and increase the efficiency of data profiles. Tangu, if you could turn on your screen or turn on your camera and unmute. Thank you.
Right. Hi, guys. Let's get started. My name is Gregory. I'm the CTO of Tangu. I hope all you can see my screen over here. So our tagline is making data most useful. What does it mean? We see a lot in companies that, especially larger enterprises, that they're scattered and they're divided in isolated pieces, and accounting, finances, the warehousing, IT systems and stuff like that. And they all have to interchange and interact with each other and provide data to each other. Now, after a while, this will get very crowded and you lose oversight. You lose everything and it can't be managed anymore. The same happens in between layers of the different data. the different data personalities in a company. You have the data analyst, the DPO, the data scientist, all those different data profiles, and they all need stuff from each other. And we even didn't mention over here IT infrastructure and the sysadmins, because of course data scientists can't do anything without infrastructure. They're competing over data, they're competing over computing power, they're competing over where to store everything. Okay, clouds can solve bits and pieces of it, but still, it's very tricky. And that's where Tango comes in. Tango tries to provide a couple of things: oversight over where is my data, where is my specific task and my specific job executed. Tango will also try to achieve this lack of communication between all those different profiles and the different entities of an enterprise. And Tango will always keep in touch with whatever is running and give a status overview and so on. Now, I'm not going to show this this movie. It's for the slideshow. I'm going to immediately go into a live demo. It's always tricky. But of course, now this is the Tango, the data ops platform. Now what you see is a fairly small data architecture. And data architecture consisting of a Kubernetes cluster with a lot of deployments. Then over here we have a Kafka broker with a lot of topics, so data is put into Kafka and stuff like that. But most importantly, we have a large graph that doesn't make any sense, but in order to make it more sensible, we can easily filter through it. If we apply the not sure what happened. Okay, if we apply the filter, then we can see over here some scripts and a Jupyter notebook and stuff like that. Now, what Tango tries to do in this type of oversight is, okay, everything is connected, and we don't remove complexity, because data science, data architecture, they tend to be complex, right? So we show it, but because we show also the connections, you can immediately see, okay, if I change something over there at the script, then it will have an impact on different pieces and parts of the entire architecture. Now, let's go into other features of this Tango platform. I've also mentioned that lack of communication between different data profiles is also a big problem in larger enterprises, and via documentation, Tango tries to provide context. Okay, this script can mean such and so. You can contact this person if you run into trouble. You even can comment on bits and pieces. And then if you are a hardcore guy or a girl, you can go into more detail of this type of resource. Then you also provide a history of everything that happens, by whom it happened on these particular resources. Now, of course, Tango doesn't code for you. Okay? The coding has to be done by yourself still. And we focused at this point on data scientists that are fluent in environments such as Jupyter notebooks. Now, I've opened the Jupyter notebook server, and this is actually this small resource over here, and it has a couple of notebooks over here, and you can immediately see, okay, this is this particular set of Jupyter notebooks. What Tango also provides is for you an easy way to immediately inject configuration parameters into this. Now, this can seem very trivial, but of course, if you're involved in changing infrastructures, if you're involved on the cloud, then suddenly public IP addresses can change. Otherwise, you have to pay for static IP addresses and stuff like that. And that's where Tango can come in handy, and it will always maintain the correct state of this configuration piece. Now, another feature because data scientists, they love to code, they love to create algorithms, and they love to create scripts and stuff and so on. But not all data science profiles are engineers as well, or architects as well. And that's where Tango also provides and supports and enables those type of profiles with some features such as easy deployment on Kubernetes. And something we're now working on is even going that step further. And when you create machine learning flows, and especially with Kubeflow, because we're now focusing on Kubeflow in the next development, we're also going to allow the data scientists to immediately push their code to Kubeflow and to let the Kubernetes instance over there immediately handle all the work and the jobs over there. Now, back to the presentation. And what we see with the companies, with our customers, is that at least 30% of the workload is reduced. And the type of workload that is reduced is all those tedious, like operation stuff and engineering stuff. Nobody likes to do, especially not the data science profiles. So in helping in the more the operation side and helping in making it easy to integrate and to connect different bits and pieces together. Where is my data and such and so on, we can reduce at least the workload by 30%. And this is purely through automation and through self-servicing. Now, another point that we also provide, and most of our customers are really looking to, is the one-on-one visualization of the entire data architecture. And a data project starts with a certain diagram of data architecture, but of course, when it's up and running, this diagram is changed over time. And Tango makes sure that you always have a live view, a real-time view on this entire data architecture. Okay, so that's small pieces of our platform that I showed now and showcased. Of course, we're open for demonstrations, bigger demonstrations, specifically tailored to use cases that you like to do. So I didn't want to mention immediately the type of domain that we as Tango are in, and it's called data ops and data operations. It's a very new methodology. It's a very new term. And it's all about communicating between teams, communicating especially with management. And then
we'd like to get a little bit of time for some questions.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Well, I appreciate that. First of all, if anybody would like a further demonstration or would like to get in touch with Tango, please indicate in the poll. And we did have one question with regards to, the question is, how does Tango generate the graph? Is it a manual process?
No, it's fully automated. So you can, of course, we need some bits and pieces. For instance, just an example, you can integrate with an existing Kubernetes cluster. What Tango then does is watch over everything. We will look for the deployments that are over there. We will look for the namespaces that are over there, config maps and stuff like that. Also, all the smaller resources that are part of this Kubernetes instance, and we will make them visible. Of course, we have a user management system where you can give and provide access to certain users of the platform, whether they can see different resources or other type of resources. But it's all automated. And also the other way around, when you create stuff with Tango, it usually means that much more will be happening behind the scenes as well. But everything will be visible in the graph, and like I said, it's automatically.
Got it. Thank you. And if anybody in the audience has other questions, please connect with Tango. Appreciate it. Next up, we have Infer.
Right.
Infer, excited for our last presentation here as well. This is a secret computing company which has pioneered cryptographic secret computing that enables advanced analytics and machine learning models while keeping data private, secure, and distributed. They're backed by organizations like JP Morgan as well. So welcome, Infer.
Thanks, Maxim, and hi guys, Kevin here with Infer. I'm going to go ahead and start to maybe share a bit of a presentation. And Maxim, that was pretty good in terms of an overview. I appreciate that. So Infer, we call ourselves a secret computing company. Really what that means is privacy preserving machine learning and analytics, and a bit about what we'll tell you today. And I think the vector of application is really just machine learning and AI are here. What's often holding it back is issues around plain old access to the data, with a quote from some friends at Google's TensorFlow. And really as a result of frictions, we're facing privacy issues, explainability issues around accessing this data or using data compliantly within the proper context that today is resulting in headwinds, whether we call that data silos or bias developing in AI or friction around data sovereignty, compliance, and even monetization of data. It's really the reasoning why we built Infer and focus on bringing cryptography into the application of data analytics. And just to set a bit of the stage, what we talk about Infer in terms of secret computing is really a third pillar of encryption, where classically you might be familiar with encryption in transit. So here we are on Zoom, and perhaps these communications are encrypted, I think, with Zoom these days, along with encryption at rest, you know, when you AES encrypt a file, kind of what Jim and Steve were talking about. At Infer, we're focused on the more elusive target of operating on data in its encrypted state. We call this secret computing. And it's a bit more complicated given the need to manipulate data while encrypted, but it affords us interesting privacy and utility trade-offs that are very, very applicable in terms of the advanced analytics space. And so it's not just about protecting your data, but it's actually about what you can do when you can also check the box on compliance and privacy of your data. And the way that we deploy that and our customers utilize it at Infer is augmenting and developing more precise, more accurate, or more explainable predictive models
Kevin?
through the use of broader and deeper data pools.
Kevin,
yes,
I also want to mention I believe if you have a slide presentation, you're not sharing the screen yet.
I'm not sharing the screen. Maxim, I'm sorry. I thought you might have been kicking it over to me. Let me take it. How about now?
Yep, seeing it now.
Cool. So just quick recap. Secret computing for us, really, it's privacy preserving machine learning, bringing privacy into the mix of data and analytics that allow us to move past some of the friction points we see around data sovereignty, bias in AI, data silos that inhibit some of the data analytics that are possible and capable today. The way that we do that is with in-use encryption. So this is the third pillar of encryption. It's in contrast to encryption in transit or encryption at rest. It's the more elusive scenario that we focus on deploying. And the way that we do that is through three primary applications that we talk about: intra-organizational, inter-institutional, and more ecosystem development that allows users to build more accurate models, whether you look at that from an AUC perspective or other precision and accuracy metrics. What we're really looking to do is bring cryptography and mathematical guarantees to data privacy, data security, and data localization to satiate our advanced analytics desire to consume more and more diverse or deeper data sets. And we're really just scratching the surface across these use cases, largely in the financial services space, helping institutions develop cross-border or cross-boundary machine learning models that comply with GDPR requirements, along with interesting intersections within the capital markets space, developing risk models and trading models, preserving underlying data privacy, really interesting expansions in more of the pre-competitive ecosystem development, particularly around fraud and anti-money laundering, where data privacy for large financial institutions is paramount, but there's great utility in more precise models to accurately sort or classify good and bad transactions within largely unbalanced data sets. To kind of put this a bit in perspective across some of the other privacy enhanced technologies or techniques that most might be familiar with, really we're using cryptography to move us past trade-offs that often exist between privacy and precision, where we might have brought things like anonymization, pseudo-anonymization, or de-identification protocols. There's also mathematical noise that can be injected into analytics around differential privacy, or even hardware-based solutions from enclaves and trusted execution environments. Where we focus actually is more using tools like fully homomorphic encryption and secure multi-party computation that move us past this trade-off, largely though at the trade-off of incremental compute, with really this premise that you can kind of have your cake and eat it too, but you bring more computational power to the mix. And in doing so, we kind of support that with the thesis of, as compute and cloud comes online, what have we largely done with it over time? We've done more precise, more performant, and more big data. And it's about time, given geopolitical, political, and personal rhetoric, that we start to allocate some of this compute to doing so privately. So doing all of the fun analytics that we're talking about, but also satiating the privacy and compliance reasons with that data behind it. And so just to take a step back and kind of introduce how this happens, one of the underlying technologies I mentioned is secure multi-party computation, which really allows us to kind of tackle a problem like this. Party A has data and party B has data. And we'd like the utility of analyzing that data as if it was aggregated or conjoined together, but we can't do that for one reason or another. We also don't want to centralize that information into a third party or a honeypot that might also represent even greater compliance or privacy risks. So to do that, we're going to kind of unpack a really introductory premise called the Yaw's millionaire problem in privacy preserving multi-party computation, where we want to do a simple function of summing the salary of 3 individuals, but do so privately. We kind of set that up by distributing and deploying infrastructure that allows us to encrypt the data and then compute on it. So essentially what we do is we tell Ali, Brian, and Caroline in this scenario to encrypt their data into correlated secret shares. And we've got a massively simplified example, but Ali might encrypt her data, keep 1 share for herself and distribute it to others. Brian and Caroline both do the same. Each player then left with what's called a secret share or an encrypted version of the underlying data. And then we ask them to perform a local operation where they sum their encrypted versions of the data and broadcast back a result, which allows us to have the equivalent and a very precise equivalent of the plain text computation, all while injecting a privacy preserving protocol. Now, very massively simplified example that gets much more complex when you start wanting to do gradient descent or logistic regression processes, but a good summary of how this principle works in one of the underlying technologies. To kind of bring it into how we deploy it to our customers and infer it's a software as a service product or just a SaaS-based component that has 3 primary access points. One being an analyst portal, which is able to be interacted from a few different methods, whether it be an API, a Python language, or a UI, which we often show and demonstrate, as well as an XOR service, which is a cloud-hosted service often talked about as this trusted dealer in a privacy-preserving computation, along with a number of virtual machines, which are deployed in the privacy zone of the data set in question. And so there is no lift or shift. We're essentially bringing compute to the data versus moving data to the compute, which allows us to really check the boxes on some of those privacy requirements. And so the way that someone might utilize it and operate with this is that an analyst submits a function, f of x, sum, divide, compare, train a logistic regression model, or execute forward propagation and inference to the XOR service, which compiles a circuit and generates random triplets to create a cryptographic protocol, which are then distributed to the players, to the virtual machines within the data source zone's privacy set, and allows them to then begin an online multi-party computation, as seen in the earlier slide, to broadcast back their partial result, which gives us precision today up to and beyond 8 digits after the decimal point. So really where we focus on in deploying XOR is high precision, privacy preserving analytics that are often focused on significantly unbalanced data sets that need more and more diverse or deep depth in the data that they train on. And so the way that someone might operate and interact with this can be our REST-based API, the GUI, which if there's interest in the group here today, we'd love to find time to show and highlight some exemplary use cases, along with some of more of our end users using a domain-specific language or a Zorpi Python extension to really just interact with this as they might from their workstation or things like their Jupyter notebook today. To get a sense of really where we operate and deploy this, we spend a lot of time in financial services. I would say healthcare is a rapidly expanding area where things like patient selection or clinical trials or even advanced diagnosis are gaining incremental insights from training or analyzing more diverse data sets. Additionally, this is hopefully something that maybe is coming onto your radar. We'd be happy to point to some of the really interesting third-party pieces that are talking about privacy-preserving computations and secret computing, from the likes of Gartner to the World Economic Forum. But more importantly, we'd love to kind of map some of the exemplary use cases that we're working on and our clients have deployed today to the cohort of plug-and-play sponsors and corporates that have interest in developing more precise predictive analytics while also satiating compliancy reasons. And just a bit on the company, a little bit of our background and where we're based. We're a Swiss-US company headquartered in New York. I'm coming to you today from sunny California, and a large team in Lausanne, Switzerland. A bit, as Maxim mentioned, we have raised our Series A from some of the classic California VCs along with JP Morgan. And we'd be happy to talk more about any of these scenario or any of the stuff we've shared today, but more specifically, how it might map into your business. And maybe Maxim, with that, I can kick it back to you for any Q&A.
Amazing. So first of all, in the audience, if you'd like an introduction to Infer, please indicate in the poll. We have a couple questions from the audience. So first off, how do you differ from other encryption solutions such as duality technologies?
Yeah, good question. So duality focuses on leveraging a singular fully homomorphic encryption capability, which is one of the underlying cryptographic protocols that we also utilize at Infer. We have one of the fastest fully homomorphic open source toolkits on the market that we develop and support called TFHE. I'd encourage you to check out TFHE and Chimera and some of our open source fully homomorphic encryption tools out there on GitHub. But more importantly, we focus our efforts on a broader set of privacy preserving techniques that include fully homomorphic encryption, as well as other things like multi-party computation, garbled circuits, private set intersections, and a more diverse set of cryptographic techniques that we call secret computing capabilities. The same way you might talk about data science being an umbrella term for a number of different predictive analytics capabilities like regression and neural networks and boosting and others. And so that's a bit about how we compare and contrast that, but we all do operate in the privacy enhanced technology space.
Got it. And then second question, are there scenarios where data can't be analyzed while it's encrypted?
Great question. Maybe where that's coming from, you can reach out through Plug and Play and we can have a deeper discussion about what that scenario might be and determine whether it fits or not. But I think in terms of known limitations of cryptographic protocols for analytics today, we're not really talking about massively big data sets in the terabytes and petaflops of the world because of the incremental computational power that's required. So data sizes and analytics are, kind of one dimensionality of where we look at understanding what technique properly fits that scenario and that privacy preserving mean. And we build that through a compiler-based protocol that allows us to chain multiple operations to kind of tackle a range of different scenarios. So I would say probably the largest limitation that we've seen today is people wanting to really crunch terabytes of information in near real time, and we're just not yet at that performance scale, though there are massive improvements that we continue to make in the performance and the scalability of the platform.
Got it. Appreciate it. Thanks, Kevin. And if anybody has additional questions, please, indicate and feel free to reach out to Kevin afterwards as well.
Right on. Thanks, Maxim.
Great. And that's all of our startup presentations that we've had for today, which brings us to the end of our event. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This was Data Analytics, securely leveraging data to optimize businesses. Hopefully, you've seen some new technologies and developments within data analytics and learned how enterprises can help incorporate data analytics to improve their own business processes. if you would like an introduction to any of the startups that we've had, please contact Mona. That's her email right there, mona@pnptc.com. As she's leading our FinTech accelerator and batch programs. And then additionally, if you'd like to ask any questions about Plug and Play, reach out to Charlie. That's his email, c.murphy@pnptc.com. You can reach out to myself. It's m.babin@pnptc.com or LinkedIn as well. And appreciate you for being with us today. That's it. Thank you.